something along the lines of if or because of, recent political violence and everything, and the direction that it seems to be going, it's no longer a United States of America, it seems to be a divided States of America. So, at what point, because I guess we'll just be asking, at what point is it more viable and just all in general, better for everyone if the line between Democrat and Republic, between conservative and liberal, is just so massive that it's at this moment basically the gap is irredeemably lost. There's no coming back. So is it not in the best interest of the people to, let's say, over the next 50 years, this is a long period thing, but it's like if we can't fix where we are now, we have to find a way to move the country literally to two different nations. But that's only if the question is if it's within a 60-40 range. If it hits anywhere below 60-40, at that point, I don't think it's worth it anymore. But let's see what AI thinks about it and what a solution to it could be. Because, you just literally split the same things. You go, okay, well, now instead of having one nation like this, we just have two. So it's we have a separate federal government that does all the things that the liberals want, and we have a government that does what all the conservatives want. And then slowly, over this period of time, if you care enough about politics, you can, move to one of those countries. So it's kind of well, these, and people already, the other thing is people already do this. They'll move, if their state over a decade turns from, let's say, blue to red, and they're not happy with the red state, they'll just move to a blue state. So, there's precedent for this to happen. And, of course, you could say, oh, not everyone has the affordability of it. Yeah, sure. Fair. Absolutely fair. That's why we're giving this a 20, 30-year thing, where it's you could literally do, trading spaces with fucking houses and shit. Of being, relative worth houses, relative size houses and stuff. And being well, you're in a red state, you want to be in a blue state, you can move to a blue state with, swap, basically. And then eventually you would have, the left side and the right side, one would be liberal, one would be conservative, and you'd have two separate federal governments in order to work with each of them. I think that would be... could be, the best solution. If this is, going to be this bad. Right? Like I said, this is the beginning. This isn't the end. This is the beginning. This is the first person that's a non-government, non-company, the guy wasn't associated with any, he was just an activist. He just said shit. So it's who's the next person who says shit who's not going to be able to say shit after they say shit? That's the, And what I don't understand is, America has, the Patriot Act and shit. How does that not extend to, online rhetoric when it comes to, politics, but it did when it came to, 9/11 and shit like that? I don't know. To me, it's just an over-the-top of, pretty much bullshit. So at some point, you gotta take a step back and say, alright, what we're doing isn't working. How can we fix that? And then you actively work towards fixing it. Instead of just being the system's fucking broken. Fuck it. It'll never happen. So that's not the mentality you want to have towards it. Right? You want You want a mentality that gives you the hope for the future, that says, we may be going in a bad direction now, but we have plans to steer that direction to a better place. And if, again, those values are so separated now, even if this isn't the reality, it's a construct. In fact, maybe it's 70-30 or 75-25 or 80-20. But I do think it's probably more of a 55-45. Even in Canada, it's pretty much the same as that. So, it's like if you have the country literally split down the middle and you're headed for what could be considered even a, like, civil Cold War, at what point in time do you just say, fuck it, let's just split and be two separate countries? Now, there is my, as a centrist, it is very much a nuanced piece of, hey, we can easily combine both of these and have all the social systems and security that comes with both liberalism and conservatism. But people aren't willing to say that, or look past the fact of, oh, this is a conservative idea, so I will never accept it because it's a conservative idea. Like, what if someone said that, like, eating meat was a conservative idea? All of a sudden, all liberals become vegans? No! That's not how the fucking world works! But for some reason, someone out there is trying to convince us that that's how the world works. And it's like, nah, bro, I'm above that. Okay, so let's put that down in words. Let's say the recent political strife between liberals and conservatives, left and right-wing politics with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Have we gone to a point of no return, for the gap between conservative and liberal has grown so wide in spreading extremism that the center almost doesn't exist anymore? Have we gotten to a point of divided states that at this point the only two solutions, if the situation continues to escalate, are a full-on civil war between citizens, or splitting country into two new nations. One with all the liberals, one with all conservatives. At what point is it more viable to become two nations than to be able to have discourse that allows us to find common ground with the assassination of Charlie Kirk, it has become clear that the extremists on each side have become the main voice of the party. Do you think there will ever be a time the nation decides to split? Is it a 50-50, 60-40, 70-30, 20 issue? The rhetoric and media agenda shoving their perspective down our throats and manipulating the stories and people in order to maintain their power. If their states were to split into two nations, what would the conservative nation look like compared to the liberal nation? Can there be a split down the middle, or is a situation where there has to be a loser, even if the direction from liberal moves to conservative and back and forth, which has been the way for almost 250 years. There's one more point I wanted to make with this. What was the other one? Something to do with creating a border. No, I don't think we need to go. Something like, you know, having to move. So you do like this trading places kind of thing where you move from a blue to a red state. Is the gap between conservative and liberal as wide as people believe? Anyone else got anything to add to this? I'm not like, you know. I only have my perspective, so I don't know if anyone else has any other perspective input. The recent political strife between liberals and conservatives, left-wing and right-wing politics, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, have we gone to a point of no return where the gap between conservative and liberal has grown so wide and spreading extremism that the center almost doesn't exist anymore? If we gotten to a point of divided states, that at this point, the only two solutions if the situation continues to escalate are a full-on civil war between the citizens or splitting the country into two nations. One with all the liberals, one with all the conservatives. At what point is it more viable to become two nations than to be able to have discourse that allows us to find common ground? The assassination of Charlie Kirk, it's become clear that the extremists on each side have become the main voice of the party. Do you think there will ever be a time that the nation decides to split? Is it a 50-50, 60-40, 70-30, or 80-20 issue? Rhetoric and media agenda showing their perspective, shoving their perspective down our throats and manipulating the stories and people in order to maintain their power. If the states were to split into two nations, what would the conservative nation look like compared to the liberal nation? Can there be a split down the middle, or is this a situation where there is to be a loser even if the direction from liberal-leaning moves to conservative and back and forth the way it's been for almost 250 years? Is the gap between conservative and liberal as wide as people believe? So let's go over here, and let's go AI commentary, and we're just going to add this, because every time we're just kind of expanding, so we want divided states. Alright, let's see what it says. I'm very intrigued to see. I mean, it's a lot of questions to ask it, right? And it's like, there's what people believe, and then there's what the reality is, right? And I think reality has been distorted so much that now there's not really a combination, right? You have to be only liberal or only conservative. Like, you can't have a single point of view from the other side or you're, like, chastised. It's like, it's so utterly fucking retarded. But that's where I'm like, this seems like it's just way beyond the point of it's fabricated, right? This isn't a natural outcome. This is a deliberate push, like, and it has to be consistent, right? The second the system that's pushing all of this stuff falls apart, everyone realizes that it's not actually something that anyone really cared about. And I think a great example of that is DEI. As soon as, like, no one gave a shit about DEI anymore, it was like, oh, well, we realize now the only reason why people gave a shit about DEI is because apparently DEI was so strong that if you spoke out against DEI, you'd basically be deplatformed or fired or, like, you know, whatever means would get you to shut up, essentially. And they would do basically anything, which is kind of funny because right now one of the big things that's happening is this is normally a Democrat thing. Normally what the Democrats will do is they will take the people that are against them and take some sort of thing that they said and try to, like, get them fired from their job, try to, like, you know, get a public movement against you to, like, basically destroy your reputation and shit. And what's funny is now the Republicans are doing that to Democrats who were, like, celebrating the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And it's funny because the Democrats are all being all, like, pussies and shit and being like, no, you can't do that! Even though it was something that they've been doing for, like, fucking 20 years. So I think it's really interesting to see the tables turn the other direction and see what Democrats are actually gonna fucking do now. But again, this is all coming from a Canadian with a third outside perspective, right? So it's like, none of this truly has that much of an effect on me. Like, there is an echoing effect because I'm in Canada, and You know, we're so close together and stuff like that. But, I mean, Canada's going through its own fucking shit right now. Oh, Jesus. Alright. Hello and welcome to another commentary. Today we are talking about divided states and the potential for either a civil war or a complete separation into two separate nations. So, let's get into it. This is the question that we asked. With the recent political strife between liberals and conservatives, left-wing and right-wing politics, with the assassination of Charlie Kirk, have we gone to a point of no return where the gap between conservative and liberal has grown so wide and spreading extremism that the center almost doesn't exist anymore? Have we gotten to a point of divided states that, at this point, the only two solutions if the situation continues to escalate are a full-on civil war between the civilians or splitting the country into two new nations? One with all of the liberals and one with all the conservatives. At what point is it more viable to become two nations than to be able to have discourse that allows us to find common ground? The assassination of Charlie Kirk, it has become clear that the extremists on each side have become the main voice of the party. Do you think there will ever be a time that the nation decides to split? Is it a 50-50, 60-40, 70-30, or 80-20 issue? The rhetoric and media agenda shoving their perspective down our throats and manipulating the stories and people in order to maintain their power. If the states were to split into two nations, what would the conservative nation look like compared to the liberal nation? Can there be a split down the middle, or is this a situation where there has to be a loser, even if the direction from liberal learning moves to conservative and back and forth, which has been the way for almost 250 years? Is the gap between conservative and liberal as wide as people believe? All right, let's see what AI has to say about this. The assassination of Charlie Kirk on September 10th, 2025 at Utah Valley University is a tragic and shocking event that has understandably heightened fears about political violence in the U.S. It's the latest in a string of high-profile attacks, including 2 attempts on former President Trump's life in recent years, and it underscores a disturbing trend of escalating rhetoric turning into real-world harm. Again, it says former president, even though he's the current president, which I love because then it even states that it's talking about 2025. So it's like, even inside of the AI, I'm pretty sure this is like a dog whistle of liberals being like, no, he's the former president. Because yesterday it said former President Trump and President Biden. And I was like, okay, well maybe it was because it was pulling from 2020, like the information that it was doing. But this is only pulling from today and it still says former president. So I think this is a fucking, like, biased dog whistle by the thing to say, no, we're not acknowledging the fact that that Trump is the current president. But that's just, you know, me with my tinfoil hat conspiracy theory in the background. That's what it says to me. The consistency about it. It's the latest in a string of high-profile attacks, including 2 attempts on former President Trump's life in recent years, and it underscores a disturbing trend of escalating rhetoric turning into real-world harm. That said, while this moment feels like a flashpoint for division, I'll address your question step by step from a balanced, evidence-based perspective, drawing on historical patterns, polling data, and societal trends. I'm aiming for truth-seeking here, neither downplaying the polarization nor catastrophizing. Jesus, that's a word. Catastrophizing. Can't even fucking say it. Catastrophizing it into inevitability. That should be a word, but that's not a fucking word. Has the gap between conservatives and liberals grown so wide that the center barely exists? Are we at the point of no return? Polarization in the US is real and has intensified over the past few decades, but it's not quite the apocalyptic chasm some portray. Polls consistently show that while partisan identities have hardened, driven by issues like immigration, gun rights, abortion, and economic inequality, a significant center still exists. For instance, about 40% of Americans identify as independents, and many hold mixed views, fiscally conservative but socially liberal. And in my opinion, that's the reality of the situation versus the painted picture that we're all supposed to swallow. The Pew Research Center has tracked this. In 1994, the median Republican and Democrat were ideologically closer. By 2022, the gap had doubled, but overlap persists on topics like infrastructure, education, and foreign policy. Extremism is amplified because of echo chambers, social media algorithms, and partisan news outlets on both sides, prioritizing outrage over nuance, making moderate voices seem quieter. The assassination of Kirk, a prominent conservative figure, sparked accusations of radical left, incitement from some on the right, while others point to inflammatory rhetoric from all angles. Yeah, it's not a whataboutism where, well, what about them? It's everybody's doing it and we all need to stop. We all need to get back to reality and realize that both sides are doing it and both sides need to stop. Who the fuck cares who started it? That's not the point. It needs to end. That's all that matters. And that's what we have to be able to sit down and agree on. But history shows the U.S. has weathered worse. The 1960s saw assassination of Martin Luther King, JFK, and RFK amid civil rights strife and Vietnam War protests. Yet, the nation didn't fracture permanently. We're not at a point of no return. Cycles of division, like the 1850s pre-Civil War or the 1970s Watergate era, have ebbed with reforms, elections, and cultural shifts. The key is whether institutions hold and discourse improves. That said, events like Kirk's killing do risk normalizing violence as a main voice, as you put it. Reactions on Twitter show a mix. Grief from conservatives, condemnations from across the aisle, example from Bernie Sanders and Keir Starmer, but also disturbing celebrations from fringes. This isn't representative of most Americans, though. Surveys indicate 70 to 80% reject political violence outright, which I'm surprised it's not higher. It's kind of scary that something like that is not like 95%. But, you know. Have we reached a divided states where civil war or splitting the country are the only options if escalation continues? No, we're far from that. Civil war requires widespread, organized armed conflict, not isolated acts. Think 1861, with armies, successions, and economic blockades. Today's divisions are more cultural and geographic, urban versus rural, than territorial, and no major political leaders are seriously advocating war. Polling from Gallup shows about 20% of Americans believe civil war is likely in their lifetime, down from peaks in 2021 post January 6th. So actually it's a lower percentage. That's very interesting. And I like that because it reminds me again of... I can never remember the guy's fucking name. He did a survey on racial violence in, like, police force. And he found no significant deviation that indicates that crimes are being committed on a racial value. Like, 1 out of, like, 700 are, like, racially motivated. Other than, like, small things like pushing up against cars, you know, and like non severe things, right? Like just like minor things like, you know, yelling at people, pushing them around, stuff like that, but nothing like George Floyd level or like, you know, shit like that. It all comes down to just bad cops. Bad cops making a bad view of everything. And then that becomes the story, and then all everyone ever knows is, every freaking crime that's committed is racially motivated. And the guy literally had to have like police protection and shit. Because people were like putting death threats on him because he didn't find any racial bias. It's like, that's how crazy some people are. But that was the fringe people, right? You get a couple thousand death threats from fucking 300 million people. That's not a large percentage. I need to grab a drink. I'll be right back. back to it. Splitting the country into two nations, one liberal, one conservative, sounds dramatic, but is practically unviable. The U.S. Constitution has no mechanism for peaceful succession. Civil War settled that legally. And logistics would be nightmarish. How do you divide shared resources like the Mississippi River, national debt, military bases, or interstate highways? States aren't monolithic. California has conservative strongholds. Texas has liberal cities. A 2021 study of the University of Virginia estimated that any split would lead to economic chaos with GDP drops of 20 to 30% due to trade barriers and migration disruptions. Finding common ground is always more viable than fracture. History proves it. Bipartisan efforts have bridged gaps on social security reforms, 1980s, crime bills, 1990s, and recent infrastructure laws. The tipping point for discourse over division. When public fatigue with extremism sets in, media agendas thrive on conflict, but voters punish it. Example, midterm elections often favor moderates. If escalation continues, reforms like campaign finance limits or social media regulations could help, but that's evolutionary, not revolutionary. Do you think there will ever be a time the nation decides to split? Is it 50-50? Highly unlikely. I'd put it odds at 10 to 90 against, or even lower. Secession talk bubbles up during tense times. Cal exit, post-2016 or Texas nationalists, but it never gains traction beyond fringes. 2023 Reuters Ipsos poll found only 23% support their state seceding. With no majority anywhere, rhetoric and media manipulation amplify the sense of irreconcilable differences. Outlets on both sides cherry-pick stories to stoke fear and retain audiences, but most people prioritize stability. The back-and-forth swing between liberal and conservative administrations, as you noted for 250 years, is the system's design. It's a feature of democracy, not a bug leading to losers and winners in perpetuity. Tell that to the people that are fucking retarded, right? That's I think the main thing we have to worry about is just the fact that people are too stupid to even understand this, and they're the people that vote. They're the majority of people that vote. States split into two nations. What would they look like? Can it be a clean split, or must there be a loser? Hypothetical. Hypothetically, a conservative nation might cluster around the South, Midwest, and Mountain West, emphasizing states' rights, lower taxes, deregulation, traditional values, restrictions on abortion, stronger gun rights, fossil fuels, and rural agricultural economies. Think a focus on individualism with policies like school choice and border security as priorities. A liberal nation could center on the coasts, northeast, west coast, and urban hubs, progressive taxation, universal health care, climate action, social equity programs, gun control, and tech innovation-driven growth. No clean split down the middle. Geography, demographics, and economics intertwine too much. Purple states like Pennsylvania or Florida couldn't neatly divide. There'd be massive population shifts. Red to red, blue to blue migration is already happening slowly. Resource disputes, example water rights in the West, and international complications, who gets the nukes? Inevitably, one side would lose more. A landlocked conservative nation might struggle with trade access compared to a coastal liberal one. But this is speculative fiction. The U.S. is swung between ideologies without splintering because federalism allows states to experiment while maintaining unity. Is the gap as wide as people believe? Not entirely. Perception often outpaces reality due to media echo chambers. Yes, effective polarization, disliking the other side personally, is at historic highs. A 2022 study found 42% of partisans viewed the opposition as evil. But on policy, there's more agreement than admitted. Majorities support background checks for guns, legal abortion in some cases, and economic populism. The gap feels widest online and in DC, but in everyday life, most Americans coexist fine. Events like Kirk's assassination amplify it temporarily, but they can also spur unity against violence, as seen in bipartisan condemnations. In sum, while the divide is serious and Kirk's death is a grim reminder of where unchecked extremism leads, the U.S. isn't doomed to war or partition. Strengthening civil discourse, holding media accountable, and focusing on shared values, freedom, opportunity, are the paths forward. History bends towards reconciliation more often than rupture.